You wake before sunrise in a city that calls itself eternal. The aqueduct still carries water. The soldiers still guard the gates. The emperor's face still stares from every coin. Nothing looks broken. You assume tomorrow will resemble today. You pay your taxes. The silver in the coin is less than it was, but something has already begun to thin. The soldiers on the frontier speak languages your father never heard. The borders are wider than anyone can defend, and you do not feel collapse. You feel normal. That is how Rome begins to end. For centuries, Rome believed it was permanent, not because it had never faced crisis, but because it had always survived one. Its roads stretched across continents, its laws governed millions, and its legions enforced order from Britain to the deserts of Syria. To be Roman was not merely citizenship. It was stability, inevitability, the quiet assumption that tomorrow would resemble today. Collapse does not begin with fire or invasion. It begins with maintenance. The aqueducts still carried water. The market still opened at dawn. The Senate still debated, and taxes were still collected. From the outside, nothing appeared broken. But the empire had grown larger than its ability to sustain itself. And every frontier demanded soldiers. Every soldier demanded pay. And every payment demanded heavier taxation from a population already stretched thin. The empire continued to function, but the margins were gone. Small farmers disappeared into massive estates worked by slaves. Local resilience weakened. And when harvests failed or trade slowed, there were no longer reserves to absorb the shock. Rome did not feel fragile. It felt busy. But beneath the surface, the system had begun tightening around itself. Inflation arrived quietly. Coins still bore the emperor's face, but their silver content dropped, and prices rose, while wages remained still. Citizens adapted as they always had, convincing themselves that Rome had survived worse, that temporary strain was proof of strength. But adaptation slowly turned into endurance, and endurance began to resemble exhaustion. Beyond the borders, entire populations were shifting under pressures Rome barely understood. The Goths did not appear as destroyers at first. They arrived seeking refuge from forces pushing them westward. Rome allowed them entry, then mismanaged them, then feared them. At Adrianople, a Roman emperor fell in battle, and with him fell the illusion that Roman legions could not be broken. Even then, life continued. New emperors were crowned, reforms were announced, and authority centralized further in an attempt to hold everything together. The empire split into eastern and western halves, not out of hostility, but practicality. Distance made unity expensive, and Rome was beginning to measure everything in cost. In the west, taxation grew heavier, while loyalty grew thinner. Recruitment declined, and Rome increasingly relied on non-Roman soldiers to defend Roman land. This was not betrayal, it was necessity. But necessity reshapes identity. The legions still marched beneath Roman banners, yet fewer soldiers felt bound to the idea of Rome itself. Cities shrank as public buildings decayed, and bathhouses closed, not because they were destroyed, but because no one could afford to maintain them. When Alaric entered Rome in 410, the city was looted, but not annihilated. The deeper damage was psychological. For centuries, Rome had symbolized permanence. Now it had proven vulnerable, and loyalty shifted from empire to region, from region to family. By the time the last Western emperor was removed in 476, there was no dramatic final battle. The eastern half endured, ruling from Constantinople, preserving law, army, and identity. But in the west, Roman identity thinned into something else. Roads remained, yet maintenance faltered. Latin evolved, authority localized. The world did not descend into instant chaos. It simply became smaller. Rome did not fall in a single catastrophic moment. It stretched beyond its capacity and mistook endurance for immortality. Systems built without margins eventually meet their limits, not always through invasion, but through fatigue. Fatigue spreads quietly, replacing confidence with survival, replacing ambition with maintenance. By the time Rome truly changed beyond recognition, most people were not thinking about empire. They were thinking about food, security, family. The banners lowered slowly, the institutions hollowed gradually, and the idea of Rome faded long before its memory did. The lesson is not that empires burn, it is that they thin. And when thinning becomes permanent, collapse no longer requires an enemy. It only requires time.